5 minutes left to see the truth about what your soulmate is really doing, and before you think this is just another dramatic message, pause right here, because this isn't meant to scare you or rush you, it's meant to wake you up gently but clearly, the way truth always does when time is no longer something to waste. There is a reason you were drawn to this exact title, at this exact moment, because your intuition already knows that something has been happening behind the scenes, something subtle, something quiet, something your soulmate hasn't known how to explain yet, even to themselves. Stop scrolling for a second, because what you're about to hear isn't about betrayal or loss, it's about awareness. Your soulmate is at a crossroads internally, and the truth about what they're really doing isn't visible on the surface. It's not in their texts, their silence, or their distance alone. It's in their inner behavior, the choices they're making when no one is watching, the conversations they're having with themselves late at night, the realizations they've been avoiding and are now being forced to face. Listen closely now, because your soulmate has been doing something very specific lately. They've been watching their own patterns. Not judging them, not fixing them yet, but observing them. This is important, because people only observe themselves when they're preparing for change. They've been replaying moments, not to relive them, but to understand why they reacted the way they did, why they pulled away when things felt real, why they hesitated when clarity was available. That kind of reflection doesn't happen accidentally. Stay right here, because the truth is this. Your soulmate has been testing their own honesty. Not with you directly, but internally. They've been asking themselves questions they avoided for a long time. Questions like, what am I actually afraid of? What am I protecting? What keeps showing up in my life, and why? These questions aren't comfortable, and people don't ask them unless something inside is no longer willing to stay the same. Don't skip this part, because while you may think your soulmate has been inactive or distant, they've actually been in a phase of internal confrontation. They're confronting the gap between what they feel and what they show. Between what they want and what they choose. Between who they've been and who they know they need to become. That confrontation takes time, and it often looks like stillness from the outside. Pay attention now, because here's a truth most people don't realize. When someone is truly preparing to change, they get quieter before they get clearer. Your soulmate hasn't been pulling away because they don't care. They've been pulling inward because they're finally taking responsibility for their inner world instead of projecting it outward. That's not avoidance. That's preparation. Stay with this, because what your soulmate is really doing right now is unlearning. They're unlearning survival patterns. Unlearning emotional shortcuts. Unlearning the belief that love must come with anxiety, confusion, or fear of loss. And unlearning is harder than learning, because it requires letting go of what once felt safe, even if it was unhealthy. Listen carefully, because your soulmate has also been noticing you differently. Not obsessively, not possessively, but consciously. They're noticing how you respond now versus before. How you carry yourself. How your energy feels steadier. How you no longer chase clarity the way you used to. This isn't going unnoticed. It's making them realize that the version of you they once thought they could approach casually no longer exists. Don't scroll yet, because this is where the truth sharpens. Your soulmate is realizing that access to you is no longer guaranteed. And that realization has shifted something deep inside them. It's forcing them to ask whether they're willing to meet you at the level you now live at, or whether they've been hoping you'd stay where you were so they wouldn't have to grow. Stay present, because the truth is this: your soulmate has been measuring themselves lately. Measuring their consistency, their courage, their emotional availability. And in doing so, they've realized that intention alone is not enough anymore. Wanting you quietly while avoiding action is no longer sustainable for them internally. Listen now, because your soulmate is also doing something else quietly. They're letting certain distractions fall away. Conversations that felt empty. Connections that were shallow. Habits that numbed rather than healed. This doesn't mean they've suddenly become perfect or enlightened. It means they're creating space. And space is always created before something real is allowed to enter. Don't miss this, because your soulmate has been sitting with discomfort instead of escaping it. Sitting with loneliness instead of filling it. Sitting with truth instead of rationalizing it. That's not easy, and people only do that when they know something meaningful is at stake. Pause here, because the biggest truth of all is this: your soulmate is no longer running from clarity. They're running out of excuses. And when excuses run out, honesty has to step in. That honesty may not have reached you yet, but it has reached them. Stay right here, because your soulmate has been rehearsing conversations internally. Not arguments. Truthful conversations. Ones where they don't hide behind vagueness or timing or fear. Ones where they speak plainly about what they feel and what they're ready for. The reason those conversations haven't happened yet is because they're still aligning their actions with their words. Listen carefully now, because alignment always comes before confession. People who speak before they're aligned create promises they can't keep. Your soulmate doesn't want to do that anymore. They're tired of half-steps, half-truths, and half-presence. Even if they haven't said it out loud, they've admitted it to themselves. Don't skip this, because what your soulmate is really doing is deciding. Deciding whether they're willing to show up differently, or whether they need to let go with honesty instead of silence. Either way, the days of emotional limbo are ending. Not because of pressure from you, but because they can no longer live comfortably in indecision. Stay present, because the next 5 minutes matter metaphorically, not literally. They represent the closing of a chapter where confusion ruled and the opening of one where truth takes responsibility. Your soulmate is stepping out of autopilot and into awareness, and awareness always changes behavior eventually. Listen closely, because this is not about chasing them or waiting anxiously. This is about understanding that something real is shifting behind the scenes. Your soulmate is not unaware. They are not indifferent. They are in the middle of an internal reckoning that will lead to clarity one way or another. Don't look for signs in social media, silence, or surface behavior alone. Look at the energy. The slowing down. The reflection. The withdrawal from distraction. These are the signs of someone who is preparing to act with integrity instead of impulse. Stay right here, because the truth about what your soulmate is really doing is this: they're preparing themselves to either meet you honestly or release you respectfully. And both require courage they didn't have before. This is not a waiting game anymore. It's a becoming phase. And becoming always happens quietly before it shows itself in the world. This is only the beginning of that truth. Before you assume that what's happening now will resolve itself quickly or neatly, pause and stay fully present, because the truth your soulmate is stepping into is not a single realization, it's a process that is still unfolding, and understanding that process will protect you from misreading the silence, the delay, or the restraint you may still be sensing. What your soulmate is really doing right now is sitting in the uncomfortable space between awareness and action, and that space is where most people either grow or retreat, but they are choosing to stay. Slow down here, because this matters. Your soulmate has reached a point where they can no longer pretend that their inner world doesn't affect the people they care about. They're realizing that avoidance has consequences, not always loud ones, but quiet ones that accumulate over time. Regret doesn't usually come from doing the wrong thing, it comes from not doing the right thing when you knew better. That awareness has arrived for them, and it's not letting go easily. Stay with this, because while you might be wondering why nothing concrete has happened yet, your soulmate has been stripping away self-deception. They've been noticing how often they told themselves they needed more time, more clarity, or more certainty, when what they actually needed was more courage. That realization is humbling, and humility slows people down, not because they're unsure, but because they want to move correctly. Listen closely now, because your soulmate has also been confronting a hard truth, that love cannot be postponed indefinitely without changing its nature. They're seeing that waiting too long doesn't preserve connection, it transforms it. It either matures into something honest or fades into something incomplete. They're deciding which one they're willing to live with. Don't scroll past this, because here's something important: your soulmate has stopped fantasizing about outcomes. They're no longer imagining best-case scenarios or ideal moments. They're thinking practically, realistically, and responsibly. They're asking themselves, if I show up, can I stay? If I speak, can I follow through? These are not romantic questions, but they are essential ones. Stay present, because this is where fear usually tries to re-enter. Fear whispers that it's safer to do nothing, safer to stay silent, safer to let time decide. But your soulmate is starting to see that time doesn't decide anything on its own, people do. And choosing not to choose is still a choice, one that leaves consequences behind. Pay attention here, because your soulmate has been feeling the weight of your growth. Not as pressure, but as contrast. They see that you're no longer orbiting uncertainty. You're no longer waiting for signs or reassurance. You're standing more firmly in yourself. That shift has made it impossible for them to approach you casually or ambiguously. Don't miss this part, because it explains why they may seem hesitant now. Hesitation doesn't always mean doubt. Sometimes it means respect. Respect for you, for themselves, and for the truth of what would be required if they stepped forward honestly. They don't want to re-enter your life as a question mark. Stay right here, because what your soulmate is really doing is measuring readiness, not desire. Desire has been there. Readiness is newer. And readiness involves consistency, emotional availability, and the willingness to be seen without hiding behind excuses or timing. Listen carefully, because your soulmate has also been grieving quietly. Not grieving you, but grieving the version of themselves that avoided, delayed, or stayed emotionally safe at the cost of connection. Grief is part of growth. It signals that an old identity is being released. Don't skip this, because grief doesn't mean they're stuck in the past. It means they're acknowledging it honestly instead of bypassing it. That acknowledgement clears the way for something real to take its place. Stay present, because another truth is emerging for them. That clarity doesn't come before action, it comes through aligned action. They're realizing that waiting to feel perfectly ready is just another form of fear. At some point, readiness is proven by movement, not certainty. But here's the key part, and listen closely: they don't want their movement to be reactive. They don't want to reach out just to ease discomfort or relieve guilt. They want to move from a place of integrity, where words and behavior match. Don't scroll, because this is why things feel slow. Integrity takes time to build when it hasn't been practiced consistently before. Your soulmate is learning how to hold their word internally before offering it externally. Stay with this, because your soulmate is also questioning what kind of partner they want to be, not just what kind of partner they want. That shift changes everything. It moves the focus from consumption to contribution, from longing to responsibility. Listen now, because this internal work means that whatever happens next will not be half-hearted. Whether they choose to step toward you or step away with honesty, it will be done consciously, not by default. Don't miss this, because the limbo you may be sensing is not stagnation. It's transition. And transitions feel uncomfortable because the old way no longer fits, but the new way hasn't fully formed yet. Stay present, because your soulmate is also confronting the fear of being seen clearly. Not idealized. Not misunderstood. Seen as they truly are, with limits, flaws, and growth still in progress. That vulnerability is something they avoided before. Now, they're learning to tolerate it. Listen carefully, because people don't do this work unless something matters deeply. Indifference doesn't reflect. Detachment doesn't wrestle with truth. Only care creates this level of internal accountability. Don't scroll away, because here is the deeper truth. Your soulmate is no longer deciding whether they care. They're deciding whether they're willing to be responsible for what they care about. That decision changes behavior permanently. Stay right here, because the next phase won't be signaled by dramatic gestures or sudden intensity. It will be signaled by clarity. Clear communication. Clear choices. Clear boundaries. Even if those choices are difficult, they will no longer be confusing. Listen closely now, because your role in this is not to wait, chase, or interpret every small movement. Your role is to stay grounded in the version of yourself you've become. That groundedness is part of what's calling them to accountability. Don't miss this ending, because the truth about what your soulmate is really doing is this: they're learning how to choose instead of drift, how to act instead of avoid, and how to live with honesty instead of comfort. And that learning is not finished yet. But it has begun. And once it begins, things never return to how they were before. Before you assume that this inner shift will automatically lead to immediate action, stay with this moment a little longer, because what your soulmate is really doing now is entering the most fragile and honest phase of the process, the phase where truth stops being theoretical and starts demanding alignment in real life. This is the part most people never see, because it happens when someone is alone, when there is no audience, no validation, no one to impress, just conscience and choice sitting in the same room. Your soulmate is no longer asking themselves what feels good, they are asking what feels right, and that distinction is quietly changing how they move, think, and respond to everything connected to you. Slow down here, because this matters deeply. Your soulmate has started to recognize how many of their past decisions were driven by comfort rather than integrity. Comfort in staying silent. Comfort in letting time pass. Comfort in believing that emotions would eventually fade without requiring courage. That comfort has dissolved. Not dramatically, not all at once, but enough that it no longer feels like safety. it feels like avoidance. And once something feels like avoidance, it becomes impossible to unsee. Stay present, because your soulmate is also confronting a truth that's difficult to admit, that clarity was available earlier, but they weren't emotionally equipped to hold it. This realization doesn't come with self-hate, but it does come with accountability. Accountability changes behavior, not instantly, but permanently. It creates a discomfort that can only be resolved through honesty, either with action or with release. Listen closely now, because your soulmate is no longer negotiating with themselves about whether this connection matters. That question has been answered. What they are negotiating now is whether they are willing to live up to what matters. That's a harder question. It requires sacrifice. It requires risk. It requires stepping out of the safety of ambiguity. Don't skip this, because this is where fear often tries to disguise itself as wisdom. Fear says, be patient. Wisdom says, be honest. Fear says, wait for the perfect moment. Wisdom says, create the right moment by being real. Your soulmate is learning to tell the difference, and that learning curve can look like hesitation from the outside, even though it's actually discernment forming on the inside. Stay right here, because something else is happening quietly. Your soulmate is replaying not just past interactions, but past versions of themselves. They're seeing where they deflected responsibility, where they minimized your feelings, where they hoped things would resolve without direct communication. This reflection isn't about blame. It's about ownership. Ownership is uncomfortable, but it's also freeing. Listen carefully, because your soulmate is also feeling the weight of time differently now. Time no longer feels like something they can hide behind. It feels like something they must respect. They're realizing that time doesn't just pass, it shapes outcomes. And what they do or don't do now will shape how this connection is remembered, honored, or closed. Don't scroll, because this is important. Your soulmate is preparing themselves for consequences. Not in a fearful way, but in a mature way. They're accepting that honesty may lead to vulnerability, rejection, or change, but silence will definitely lead to regret. That acceptance marks a turning point. Stay with this, because your soulmate is also disentangling guilt from responsibility. Guilt says, I'm bad for not acting sooner. Responsibility says, I can act correctly now. Guilt paralyzes. Responsibility mobilizes. They are choosing the latter, even though it's slower and harder. Listen now, because your soulmate is also learning how to sit with uncertainty without escaping it. Before, uncertainty triggered distraction, busyness, or emotional numbing. Now, they are letting uncertainty exist without trying to outrun it. That skill alone changes how someone approaches love. Don't miss this, because this is where self-respect is being rebuilt. Your soulmate no longer wants to approach you from a place of apology, confusion, or half-clarity. They want to approach, if they do, from a place of grounded truth. And grounding takes time when it hasn't been practiced before. Stay present, because your soulmate is also considering something they avoided in the past, the possibility that the most loving thing they could do might not be to hold on, but to be honest enough to let go if they cannot meet you where you are. That thought is painful, but it's also respectful. Love that respects the other person's growth does not cling selfishly. Listen carefully now, because this is where your role becomes clear too. You are no longer meant to wait in anticipation or anxiety. You are meant to remain anchored in your own clarity. That clarity is not passive. It's active. It communicates standards without words. It creates a mirror your soulmate cannot avoid looking into. Don't scroll away, because the energy you carry now is part of what's catalyzing this reckoning. Your steadiness, your boundaries, your refusal to chase ambiguity have created a contrast your soulmate can no longer ignore. Contrast is what awakens accountability. Stay here, because your soulmate is also realizing that whatever they choose next will define not just this connection, but how they see themselves going forward. Will they be someone who chooses truth even when it's uncomfortable, or someone who prioritizes comfort at the cost of integrity? That question is shaping their internal dialogue every day now. Listen closely, because this internal pressure is not being caused by you. It's being caused by alignment. When someone's values begin to mature, misalignment becomes painful. And pain motivates change. Don't miss this, because while it may feel like nothing is happening externally, something irreversible is happening internally. Once someone sees themselves clearly, they cannot go back to unconscious behavior without internal conflict. That conflict will eventually force resolution. Stay present, because resolution doesn't always look like reunion. Sometimes it looks like clear communication. Sometimes it looks like honest closure. Sometimes it looks like a respectful stepping back. But whatever form it takes, it will not look like silence or confusion anymore. Listen carefully now, because your soulmate is preparing to end one of two things, either the distance between truth and action, or the connection itself, but in a way that honors what was real instead of avoiding it. Both require courage they didn't have before. Don't scroll, because the next phase will not arrive as a dramatic announcement. It will arrive as a shift in tone. A change in energy. A difference in how things are spoken or not spoken. You'll feel it more than you'll see it. Stay with this message, because understanding what's really happening protects you from misinterpreting the final outcome. This process is not about winning or losing love. It's about aligning with truth. And here is the deepest truth of all. Your soulmate is no longer asleep to their own patterns. And once awareness arrives, change is inevitable. It may be slow. It may be quiet. But it will be real. This is what your soulmate is really doing now. And this is why the truth is finally coming into view. Before you assume the hardest part is already over, stay with this moment a little longer, because what unfolds now is where truth stops being internal and starts pressing gently but firmly against the edges of real life. This is the phase where awareness becomes unavoidable, where insight asks to be embodied, and where your soulmate can no longer live comfortably in the space between knowing and doing. It may not look dramatic from the outside, but internally, this is the most decisive stretch of the journey so far. Slow your breath for a second, because what your soulmate is really facing now is not you, not the connection, and not the future, but themselves without the buffer of distraction. The questions they've been asking quietly have sharpened. They're no longer vague or philosophical. They're practical. What am I actually capable of giving? What kind of partner am I willing to be consistently, not just when emotions are high? What happens if I don't step up now? These questions don't come from pressure. They come from maturity. Stay present, because this is where the difference between intention and integrity becomes clear. Intention lives in feelings. Integrity lives in follow-through. Your soulmate is realizing that for a long time, they relied on intention to excuse inaction. They told themselves that caring quietly was enough, that good intention somehow softened the impact of silence. That belief is dissolving. They're seeing that unexpressed care doesn't protect anyone. It only postpones responsibility. Listen carefully now, because your soulmate is also learning that clarity is not something you wait to feel comfortable with. Clarity is something you choose to create. Waiting for comfort kept them stuck. Choosing clarity requires risk. And risk is no longer something they can avoid without losing self-respect. Don't skip this, because the internal tension you may be sensing isn't confusion anymore. It's alignment trying to happen. Alignment often feels tense because it requires letting go of familiar identities. Your soulmate is shedding the identity of the one who delays, the one who avoids, the one who hopes things resolve themselves. That identity has become too small for who they are becoming. Stay right here, because your soulmate is also confronting a fear that runs deeper than rejection, the fear of being fully seen. Being seen means no longer hiding behind timing, ambiguity, or emotional distance. Being seen means standing behind one's words and actions. This level of exposure is terrifying for someone who learned to protect themselves through detachment. Listen closely, because what they're doing now is practicing honesty internally so they don't collapse under it externally. They're rehearsing truth, not to manipulate outcomes, but to build the strength to speak without defensiveness. They don't want to approach you from a place of emotional overflow or guilt. They want to approach from steadiness. Don't miss this, because this explains why things may feel slower right now, not faster. Speed would mean escaping discomfort. Slowness means staying with it until it transforms. Your soulmate is choosing transformation over relief. Stay present, because they're also becoming aware of how silence has shaped your perception. They know that silence communicates something, even when nothing is said. They're realizing that leaving meaning open-ended can be more painful than offering an honest answer, even if that answer is difficult. That realization is shifting how they view responsibility in connection. Listen carefully now, because your soulmate is also letting go of the fantasy that there's a perfect way to handle this without anyone feeling anything. That fantasy kept them frozen. They're learning that emotions are not failures. Avoidance is. Feeling something is not the problem. Pretending nothing is happening is. Don't scroll, because this is important. Your soulmate is beginning to accept that whatever they choose will define the story, not just the outcome. How they handle this moment will become part of their character. Will they be someone who faces truth with courage, or someone who protects comfort at the expense of honesty? That question is shaping every internal decision right now. Stay with this, because they're also noticing how different this moment feels compared to the past. Before, hesitation felt like safety. Now, hesitation feels like self-betrayal. That flip doesn't happen unless real growth has occurred. Listen closely, because your soulmate is also evaluating what kind of regret they could live with. Regret from trying and being vulnerable, or regret from staying silent and never knowing? This isn't about winning or losing. It's about living with integrity. Don't miss this part, because while you may still feel uncertainty, your soulmate is no longer uncertain about one thing. Doing nothing is no longer an option that feels neutral. Doing nothing now feels like choosing against truth. And that awareness changes behavior eventually, even if not immediately. Stay present, because this is where your steadiness matters most. Not your availability. Not your patience. Your steadiness. You are no longer sending mixed signals. You are no longer chasing clarity. You are simply being clear in yourself. That clarity is confronting them more powerfully than any words could. Listen carefully now, because your soulmate is also noticing the cost of emotional limbo on their own well-being. Carrying unspoken truth creates internal pressure. Pressure eventually demands release. They can feel that pressure building, not as panic, but as inevitability. Don't scroll away, because this is where timing becomes critical. Not because time is running out, but because alignment has a window. When someone reaches this level of awareness, they either move forward with honesty or retreat in a way that creates long-term regret. Your soulmate is standing at that fork. Stay here, because the next step will not come with a countdown or a dramatic sign. It will come with a shift in posture. A willingness to be direct. A change in how they communicate. Even if the words are few, the energy will be different. Listen closely, because your soulmate is also deciding how much responsibility they're willing to carry for the impact they've had. This is not about blame. It's about ownership. Ownership restores dignity to everyone involved. Don't miss this, because ownership is the bridge between awareness and action. And your soulmate is stepping onto that bridge now, even if they're still finding their footing. Stay present, because whatever happens next will not be accidental. It will be chosen. Chosen from a place that didn't exist before. Chosen with awareness instead of avoidance. Listen carefully now, because the truth about what your soulmate is really doing at this stage is this: they are preparing to live with the consequences of honesty rather than the slow erosion caused by silence. That preparation is quiet, internal, and deeply human. Don't scroll, because this understanding protects you. It keeps you from personalizing the delay, from doubting your worth, from reading silence as indifference. What's happening now is not about your value. It's about their courage. Stay right here, because courage doesn't always look like bold action right away. Sometimes it looks like staying with discomfort long enough to change. And that is exactly where your soulmate is now. The truth is no longer hidden. It is being faced. And once truth is faced fully, resolution is no longer a question of if, but how. This is the moment before clarity becomes visible. And it matters more than it appears. Before you look for a final answer or a clear outcome, pause and stay right here, because this stage is not about endings yet. It's about the last internal resistance quietly dissolving, the kind that doesn't fight truth anymore but still needs time to fully surrender to it. What your soulmate is really doing now is standing in the space where there is no illusion left to hide behind, and that space is uncomfortable because it demands honesty without guarantees. Listen carefully, because your soulmate has crossed a threshold where distraction no longer works. The things they once used to avoid difficult feelings don't numb them anymore. Busyness feels empty. Social noise feels loud. Emotional shortcuts feel dishonest. This is not depression, and it's not confusion. It's clarity beginning to press forward, asking to be lived instead of analyzed. Stay present, because your soulmate is now aware that whatever they do next will ripple outward, not just toward you, but toward how they see themselves. They're realizing that integrity is not something you claim, it's something you demonstrate when the moment costs you comfort. And this moment is costing them comfort. Don't skip this, because something important has shifted. They are no longer asking, what's the safest option? They're asking, what's the truest one? That question changes everything. Safety can be found in avoidance. Truth cannot. Truth requires presence, courage, and accountability. Pay attention now, because your soulmate is also releasing a subtle but powerful fantasy, the fantasy that things could somehow resolve without discomfort. That fantasy kept them stuck longer than they realize. They're seeing now that growth always asks something of you. It asks you to feel what you avoided, to say what you withheld, to face what you hoped would fade on its own. Stay with this, because your soulmate is also coming to terms with the fact that clarity doesn't mean control. Even if they speak, even if they act, they cannot control the outcome. They can only control their honesty. That loss of control is frightening for someone who relied on distance to feel safe. Listen closely, because they are also noticing how much energy silence has cost them. Silence once felt like protection, but now it feels like weight. Carrying unspoken truth creates pressure that eventually demands release. That pressure is building now, not explosively, but steadily. Don't scroll away, because this is the phase where many people mistake calm for indifference. What's happening is the opposite. Your soulmate has moved past emotional turbulence into sober clarity. They're not panicking anymore. They're deciding. Stay present, because your soulmate is also evaluating the quality of regret they want to live with. Regret for being honest and vulnerable, or regret for staying silent and wondering what might have been. This is not a dramatic dilemma. It's a deeply human one. And it's being taken seriously. Listen carefully now, because they are also realizing that silence communicates something whether they intend it to or not. Silence has a message. Distance has an impact. And avoiding action doesn't preserve neutrality. It creates a narrative. They're no longer comfortable letting that narrative write itself. Don't miss this, because your soulmate is also becoming aware of how much you've changed. Not just externally, but energetically. You're not reaching anymore. You're not asking for clarity. You're not trying to manage their uncertainty. That steadiness is both grounding and confronting for them. Stay with this truth, because your steadiness removes excuses. It eliminates the ability to hide behind timing, confusion, or not knowing. When someone else is clear in themselves, it exposes where you are not. Listen closely, because your soulmate is also practicing what it would feel like to speak honestly. They're imagining conversations where they don't minimize, deflect, or soften the truth to make it easier. They're realizing that honesty doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to be real. Don't skip this, because this rehearsal isn't about manipulation. It's about courage. Courage is built internally before it's expressed externally. They're strengthening that muscle now. Stay present, because another realization has surfaced, that love cannot be sustained by good intentions alone. Intentions without action eventually turn into resentment, even if no one says it out loud. They don't want to contribute to that anymore. Listen carefully now, because your soulmate is also letting go of the idea that they need to feel completely ready before acting. Readiness, they're learning, is often revealed by action, not felt beforehand. Waiting to feel fearless only prolongs fear. Don't scroll, because this is where humility enters. They're accepting that they may stumble, that they may not say everything perfectly, that they may not control how they're received. Humility allows honesty to move forward without ego. Stay with this, because your soulmate is also asking themselves who they want to be after this moment passes. Not in your eyes, but in their own. Someone who chose truth, or someone who chose comfort. That self-image matters deeply to them now. Listen closely, because they are also noticing something subtle but powerful, the relief that comes when they imagine being honest. Even if the outcome is uncertain, the relief of no longer carrying ambiguity feels lighter than the burden of silence. That feeling is guiding them. Don't miss this, because this is the moment where internal alignment begins to overtake fear. Fear still exists, but it no longer has the final say. Alignment is quieter, but stronger. Stay present, because the way forward is becoming simpler, not easier. Simple means clear. Clear means unavoidable. The next step is no longer about analysis. It's about choice. Listen carefully now, because your soulmate is also preparing for the possibility that honesty may lead to change they didn't anticipate. They're accepting that truth reshapes reality. And they're choosing to respect that power instead of fearing it. Don't scroll away, because this is where your role becomes even more important, not by doing anything, but by continuing to be who you are. Your groundedness is not passive. It's catalytic. It sets a standard that invites truth to rise. Stay with this, because your soulmate is nearing the point where internal pressure meets external expression. That doesn't always happen loudly. Sometimes it happens with a simple shift in communication. A direct sentence. A clear boundary. A moment of courage. Listen closely, because when this shift happens, it won't feel chaotic. It will feel clean. Even if emotions are present, the confusion will not be. Confusion has already burned away. Don't miss this final understanding, because the truth about what your soulmate is really doing right now is this: they are choosing who they will be in this story, not just what they will do. And that choice is being made carefully, consciously, and with far more honesty than ever before. Stay present, because whatever comes next will not repeat the past. It will emerge from a place that didn't exist before. This is not the end of the process. This is the moment before integrity becomes visible. And when it does, you will recognize it immediately, not by intensity, but by clarity.